Okay, welcome to Daf Yomi 1 week at a time, Masechet Rosh Hashanah. So nice to see everyone. Haven't seen you in so long. We are now starting Masechet Rosh Hashanah. So I'm going to give a brief introduction to this Masechet. You might think, oh, so Chaval, we already celebrated Rosh Hashanah, and now all of a sudden we're going to talk about Rosh Hashanah. So don't worry. We are going to get to Rosh Hashanah, the festival that we're all familiar with, as you can see in the picture with the shofar. We're going to get to it, but only later on in the Masechet, as we have become accustomed to learning things at the end of the Masechet. The beginning of the Masechet is going to deal with other issues. The first thing is the concept that there are multiple Roshei Shana, right? If I ask you when Rosh Hashanah is, everyone will answer on the first day of Tishrei. That's the day I know I go to shul, there's a lot of davening, I blow the shofar. We're all familiar with that first day of the year. However, we're going to learn in 1 minute that there are actually 4 beginnings of the year for different things. So we will discuss that in the first Mishna. Just a few things about the Jewish calendar, because that's going to be a majority of the topic in this Masechet. So the Jewish calendar, I think most people know, is based on a lunar cycle. We have the concept of Rosh Chodesh, the beginning of the month. We're going to talk a lot about how they determined the beginning of the month based on testimony about the moon. So if anybody likes astronomy, you're going to love this Masechet. Anybody who doesn't, so you're going to learn new things. So we're going to talk about the lunar cycle. What's interesting to understand is, right, the lunar cycle is a shorter year than the solar cycle, the solar calendar. And therefore, right, the Gregorian calendar, the calendar that we're used to, is solar. The Muslim calendar is solely lunar. The Jewish calendar is actually a combination of lunar and solar. What do we mean by that? Our months go according to the moon, right? Rosh Chodesh is going to be the new moon. Tet Vav is always going to be the full moon. The 15th of the month will be the full moon, and the end of the month will be, again, that sliver of a moon. However, if you only keep a lunar calendar, the months, or I should say the holidays, the dates, will not remain in the same seasons. Right, because every year it's going to be 11 days shorter, and then we're going to fall into a problem. What's the problem? The problem is that, or the issue is, the Torah tells us that Pesach needs to be in the spring, right? Shavuot needs to be in the harvest time, right? Pesach is the harvest of the barley. Shavuot is the harvest of the wheat. Sukkot is generally, again, the gathering, the end of the harvest season. So it's very crucial that the Jewish calendar remain within the months, or I should say the seasons that they're supposed to be, and therefore we add a leap year. What is a leap year? In the Jewish calendar, we add an entire month. This year, actually, so it's beautiful. This year is actually a leap year. 5782 is a leap year, and we are going to have 2 Adars this year. We're going to have Adar Aleph and Adar Bet. So if you felt that the Chagim this year were very early, right? Rosh Hashanah was very early. All the Chagim till till Purim are going to be very early. Purim is going to be late because we're going to celebrate it a whole month after we would normally celebrate it. So too Pesach. Pesach is going to be a whole month later than last year, right? So instead of it being in March, it's going to be in April this year. So that's just some concepts that we're going to go through in this Masechet. But now we're going to start with Daf 2. For those of you who are new to learning Gemara, it's important to understand that the Gemara starts on page 2, right? Daf Bet. This is, I think, a beautiful concept that there is no beginning and end to learning Torah. Right, we jump right in. Right, we say that the Torah is like a sea, and therefore we're going to jump right in. It's as if you started already. So we're on Daf 2, Daf Bet, and the Mishnah tells us that there are 4 new years. Again, I'd like to thank Daf HaChaim for these graphics. So there are 4 new years, and we're going to go through each one. So Nisan, the first is Nisan. This is the first, this is the beginning of the year for kings and for festivals. We'll discuss what that means in the Gemara. The beginning of Elul is the beginning of what's called Ma'aser Behema. When an animal is born from Elul till the whole year, they're considered all 1 year, and therefore you can tithe them together. Animals that were not born on the same year cannot be tithed together. Here, there's a machloket. Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Shimon say actually that no, it's not in Elul, it's actually in Tishrei. But again, that's for another daf. The next is the beginning of Tishrei. This we're familiar with. That's our Rosh Hashanah. It's the beginning of the year of the counting, right? 5, 7, 8, 2 began on the 1st of Tishrei. It's also the beginning of Shemitah, right? Everyone knows this year we started Shemitah, and that started on Aleph Tishrei. Also Yovel, the Jubilee year, because it's connected to Shemitah, it also starts in Tishrei. It's also the beginning for counting the age of a fruit tree, because a fruit tree in its first 3 years, you're not allowed to eat the fruit. It's called orla, and therefore, how do you count how old that tree is? You might think it's from when you planted it. So no, the Gemara says from Tishrei. That's the beginning of that tree's life. The same thing with vegetables. And the beginning of Shvat, or this is also a machloket, or the 15th of Shvat. You're all familiar with the festival or the holiday of Tu B'Shvat, right? The 15th of Shvat. That is the Rosh Hashanah for trees, and therefore trees that ripened after this date are considered 1 year, and they cannot be tithed with fruits that were not from that year. And of course, the Gemara is going to explain all of this. But first, we're going to talk about the kings. So the Gemara tells us that they need to standardize the year for the kings. Why? Because of documentation, right? If you write let's say an IOU or a contract, you need to write the date. So the date was not only today is the 5th of Cheshvan, the year 5782, but it would also have said, and it's the 3rd year to King Solomon's reign. So you needed to know when to start counting the reign of the king, and that needed to be standardized. So the Gemara says that if the king became the king on the 29th of Adar, again, that's 1 day before Rosh Hashanah, right? So in, I guess in English terms, if something happens on December 31st, right, does it count as the old year or the new year? How do we view that? So the Gemara says that if the king started, took office, was coronated on the 29th of Adar, that counts as a whole year, which means that when it now gets to Nisan, meaning the next day, you say this is the 2nd year of the reign of King Solomon. Even though he reigned for 2 days, you say it's the 2nd year, because in Adar it was considered 1 year, and now it's the end of the year, and now it's the 2nd year. If the king started in Aleph Nisan, so then it counts from then, even if they decided to appoint him in Adar, that doesn't count. It goes by the date that he was coronated. Okay. And here the Gemara says, why is this important to understand? To teach us that one day, right? Every day is important. One day can count as an entire year. Also in Adar, also in Nisan. The Gemara now gives us the source for Nisan to be the new year for the king, because the verse mentions the exodus from Egypt and the year of the king. And therefore, the Gemara says, just like the Exodus happened in Nisan, right, Yetziat Mitzrayim, they left Egypt in Nisan, so too the king is counted from Nisan, and not from Tishrei, right? We might think maybe from Tishrei, from the beginning of the calendar year. The Gemara says no, and it actually brings a proof from the Torah. The Torah tells us that Aaron dies in the 40th year from when they left Egypt. And Moshe speaks to the nation of Israel in Adar, right? So one second. Aaron dies in Av, right? In the summertime, in the 40th year. And Moshe speaks to the nation in Adar, and it says it's also the 40th year. So the Gemara says, we went from Av, we passed Tishrei, and we went to Adar, and it's still the 40th year. Therefore, that shows that Tishrei is not the new year, because then it would have been the 41st year. And therefore, we see that it's only 40 years, and we count the Exodus from Nisan, from when they left Egypt. Okay, the Gemara on Daf 3 tells us, one second, that maybe we should count the year from, maybe not from Nisan, maybe we should count from another month, from Iyar, from the second month, or the third month. And the Gemara says, no, we're going to learn that we connect it to the Exodus, and we are going to start counting from Nisan and not from another month. So now we said that that Nisan is the beginning of the year for a Jewish king. The Gemara now teaches us that for a non-Jewish king, their year starts in Tishrei. And here, the Gemara gives us, I'll give you a little bit of a historical context, because the Gemara is going to talk about Nehemiah. Nehemiah was a prophet who lived in the time of what's called the return to Zion, Shivat Zion, when they went from the Persian Empire back to Israel to rebuild the second temple. And here, basically, the Persian king Koresh allows the Jews to return to Israel to rebuild the temple. And a small group goes, they're led by Zerubbabel, but the enemies of the Jews complain to the king. The king's name is Artaxerxes. It's a hard name, a Persian name. And they complain to him. And then he says, you know what? I don't want to hear any of this problems. You have to stop building the Beit HaMikdash. Sorry, I see Zohar asked a question. If Tishrei is the beginning of years, how come Av and Adar are the same year? Excellent question. The answer is we're not counting the year as in 5782. They were counting the year, the 40th year from the Exodus, not the calendar year, rather the number of years from the Exodus. So that was from Nisan and not from Tishrei. So that's why I said it's the same year, and we're not talking about calendar year. Thank you for having me clarify that. Okay, so now we're back to the Jews are in Israel. They wanted to build the temple. It was stopped. Now comes Achashverosh. That's the story of Purim. Now comes Daryavish the second, Darius, the Persian king, and he allows the Jews to continue building the temple, and the temple is built and completed in the 6th year of Darius's reign. So here we're going to have the story of Nehemiah, who in Kislev, it's the 20th year of Artaxerxes' reign, and he hears that the Jews need help in Israel, and in Nisan. So this is a good trying to remember the months of the Jewish calendar. Kislev is winter time, right around December, and then in Nisan, in April, let's say, Pesach time in the spring, he goes to the king and asks permission to go to Israel. And it says both of these are the 20th year of the reign of Darius. And therefore, since they're both the 20th year, again, Kislev and then Nisan, so we see that the year of the reign of the king did not change. Therefore, Nisan is not when the year changes for a non-Jewish king. Rather, it changes in Tishrei. So here the Gemara then kind of goes, I guess, on a tangent to explain the story that Nehemiah got a message from the Jewish settlement in Israel that they need help rebuilding the temple. And then in Nisan, he goes to the king and he's very sad. And the king says, why are you so sad? And he says, because I want to go and help my brethren in Israel. And the king lets him go to rebuild the temple, as long as he, tells him when he's going to come back. And here the end of the daf tells us that Koresh, Cyrus, the Persian king, was a good king for the Jews. And therefore, this is very interesting, even though he's not a Jewish king, because he was good for the Jews, we count his reign from Nisan, like the Jewish kings, and not from Tishrei. However, interestingly, the Gemara says, but wait a minute, I have a source where his year is counted from Tishrei and not from Nisan. So what do we do about that? So the Gemara says, well, when he was good, we counted the years from Nisan, but then he became bad, and then we counted the years from Tishrei. And here the Gemara on Daf 4 is going to continue to discuss when Darius or Cyrus, and interestingly, the Gemara says here that they're all the same person. Darius and Cyrus were the same person. They just have different, he's called different things at different times. And another, just an interesting fact is that the name Artaxerxes, which was one of the kings, first of all, could be one of the kings. However, the Gemara suggests that the name Artaxerxes is really a general term for king of Persia. Like we see in Egypt, right? The general term for king of Egypt is Pharaoh, right? So Paro. Paro is not a specific person, right? There are many pharaohs. So too, the Gemara suggests that Artaxerxes is a general name and not a specific person, and therefore Darius and Cyrus, Koresh and Daryavesh could also be Artaxerxes as well. So with that, I hope that was not too confusing. Next week, we're going to continue talking about the beginning of the year for different, I would say, different aspects in our lives. Again, we don't really think about the beginning of the year for a king because we don't have kings nowadays, but we will talk about the beginning of the festivals. We actually learned this, I think it was even in this Masechet, when we say you vow. Well, we'll learn it next week. We'll leave it as a cliffhanger to see what it means. So with that, I wish everyone a wonderful week, Shavua Tov and a Shabbat Shalom, and we will see everyone next week as we continue on our journey in Masechet Rosh Hashanah. So wishing everyone a great week.
Thank you.